Welcome to Grow Organically, the podcast where we host candid discussions with wealth management and financial pros. Each episode, we break down factors that drive growth at wealth management firms and how organizations can continue to be forward thinkers in today's competitive landscape. Grow Organically is brought to you by Catchlight. You can access all our podcasts, including show notes and other resources to keep learning at catchlight.ai. Dan Gilmartin is the host of Grow Organically and is the head of marketing at Catchlight.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back for another episode of Grow Organically. I'm really excited about today's episode, welcoming Kristen Luke to the program. Kristen's the founder of Kaleido and the author of what I think is a great book called Uncomparable. She's been working in the wealth management space since 2008. I think it was the fall of 2008, if I'm not mistaken, which I was around then, and that was a really good time to get into the financial services business. Kristen, would you share a little bit of your background with the audience?
Absolutely, Dan. Thanks for having me here today. I actually started in the wealth management industry in 2005, but I did start my own business in 2008, which is an even worse time to start a business in financial services in October of 2008. Over that time, I have been working with independent advisors and helping them market their businesses. Since I started in this industry, really have done everything you can possibly imagine for firms to do to market their businesses. Done radio shows and workshops, social media, SEO, and everything in between. Really, over the last 4 years, though, I've been making a transition to focusing on advisors who want to focus on a niche market. And I'll go into that a little bit more about why I think niching is the best way for advisors to market themselves. But really, during the pandemic, came to the conclusion that that is one of the easiest ways for advisors to do that, to market their businesses. And last year, actually, I published the book, Uncomparable, The Financial Advisor's Guide to Standing Out Through Niche Marketing. And that really guides the work that we do with advisors today.
Awesome. Well, again, welcome to the program, Kristen. A quick question, uncomparable. I'm very familiar with the term incomparable. Maybe a quick definition, so we ground the audience in the difference between those two.
Sure. Uncomparable might not actually be a word. Depends on what dictionary you look at. It's a word that I use, though. I think of the word incomparable, or the word incomparable, as actually meaning the best of something. So are you the best financial advisor in your town, or the best, restaurant in your area? So, better than everyone else. Uncomparable, though, is so different that no one else can compare themselves to you. So if you just think about it this way, incomparable is the best, uncomparable is different. And in the book, I argue that you want to be uncomparable because it's so much easier to prove that you are different than you're the best. People won't know you're the best until they've had an experience with you and actually be able to compare that with other experiences they've had. And they have to choose you to do that. So it's not really a great way to market yourself to be incomparable. It's better to be uncomparable. Love
it. And as a marketer, it really strikes a chord with me. Being in this industry now for a number of years, I'm a student of how firms are presenting themselves and how they seek to distinguish themselves from others. And as you look at advisor websites, firm websites, you see this quintessential view of a couple arm in arm walking down the beach to a glorious sunset of retirement. And then, beyond the imagery, some of the messaging can be worse. Things like make your money work harder, things like that. So, I again, as a marketer, I think this notion of being uncomparable is really important. At a super high level, would love to hear how you think firms should be thinking about distinguishing themselves.
Sure. My favorite messaging, though, on a website has peace of mind. If you have peace of mind on your website,
peace of mind, that's a classic, right?
It is a classic.
We give you peace of mind. Yep.
Yeah.
Security too, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So there are so many ways that advisory firms can stand out, and I'll go through those. And I think once you hear all the different ways, you'll realize that, okay, maybe focusing on niche is maybe one of the easier ways. So when I think of all the ways that they can distinguish themselves or stand out, one way is to spend so much money that people can't ignore you. They just have enough money in their marketing that they are able to be everywhere and people just cannot ignore them. Another way is to be controversial, which I know a lot of financial advisors prefer not to get into.
Right.
I was thinking about that recently when I was driving. I live in San Diego, and I was driving down the freeway, and there are these billboards for this divorce attorney, and they have a picture of this person with their ring finger standing up, like they were giving the middle finger, and that was all it really was. And it had a tan line from no wedding ring anymore, and all it has
Well,
their name.
that's certainly a way to distinguish your firm.
Right. So like being controversial like that. I don't know a lot of advisors who want to do that, or advisory firms. Another one is to have a very distinct brand, which can also be very challenging to incorporate, make sure that everyone's seeing that out there. For some people, they can actually differentiate by doing things differently. And when I say this, it's like I have worked with firms in small markets where they really are the only fee-only RIA in their area, and in which case, they can distinguish themselves that way. Most firms, though, tend to be in much larger markets, and that's not a way to distinguish themselves. A lot of advisors would love to say they distinguish themselves by service, but showing that you have excellent customer service is really difficult before they become a client. So that makes it really challenging too. Some people distinguish by performance. That gets real tricky when you're trying to say, you're the best because we perform, or you should work with us because we have the best performance. It's going to be a compliance issue. And also then you have to always live up to that standard. So I think the easiest way for people to distinguish themselves is to say, hey, I specialize with this niche, this group of people, and because I know everything about them, you should come work with me if you're in that group, because I am different than everyone else. Everyone else works with general populations. I work with just people like you. So by choosing a niche, it makes it so much easier to stand out in the eyes of the people that you actually want to work with.
Right, without a doubt. And so I have a copy of the book here. I appreciate you sending it to me. It's really fascinating. And again, as a marketer, I think about my job every day, and how do I think about our ideal customer profile? And for the advisors and the firms we serve, we often talk to them about defining their ICP, looking at their existing book of business, looking at the prospects that they're bringing in to the top of their funnel. And I think it's critical that for any growth plan that you define that target market, define who you're going to serve and why. I think that's part of your book. Would love you to share your thoughts on why niching. And maybe give a few examples of firms you're working with and their niches in particular.
Right. When you niche, it really helps focus where your marketing efforts are going to be. If you just had an unlimited amount of people that you could market to, it really starts to be challenging of like, well, where do I spend my time? What events do I go to? What social media should I be spending time on? What ads should I be running? And so it just makes it really challenging if basically your entire market is anyone that has enough money to invest with you.
Yeah, like pre-retirees. We see that a lot out there. We work with pre-retirees. That's a massive audience. Tough to pin down.
It's very hard to pin down, and then you start throwing things at the wall, hoping that something is going to stick, instead of really having a clear focus on where you're going. Niching can kind of be in a couple of different ways. So I know that most of your audience listening are larger firms, and so they are probably never going to niche as a whole firm, just because they have too many different types of clients. So in those situations, I think of niching as more like having different specialty areas that their individual advisors or groups or teams of advisors are going to focus on. And so that could be things like you have a division that just focuses on executives and equity comp, or the medical industry, or attorneys. And so you kind of have a little bit broader definition of a niche in those scenarios than compared to maybe an individual solo advisor who's going out on his own, and he has decided that he's going to focus on something very narrow. Like there's an example of an advisor who focuses on tattoo artists, right? So larger firms have a hard time niching to that degree, and I actually don't think that's the best way for them to go. But still having different specialty areas of one type of client that faces one type of problem makes a lot of sense, because it does focus their marketing efforts on this particular group of people.
And a niche doesn't have to be, a group of 10 or 20 or 30 individuals. You could have a niche that's pretty wide. You talked about executives, perhaps in technology companies with distinct compensation plans. I think you have an example of that in your book. Speaking of teams, how can a team or how can a firm know that a niche that they're going after is large enough?
This is always a challenging question because if you get good at a niche, you don't need as big of a market share, so you can actually have a smaller niche. So, for example, if you were working with like Boeing employees and you just were really good at that and had really great access, and you could, work with 25% of them, that would probably be plenty.
Yeah, that's a pretty big base of people. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So what I think though is like you can let's assume that you can work with 1% of a niche. And so you have to think about how many clients you want. Let's say an individual advisor can focus on 100 clients. Then, if you're getting 1% of those people, that's what, 10,000 people. Now, if you have, multiple advisors that are working on that niche, then you just kind of do the math from there. So,
Right.
One niche, I'd say 10,000 people is probably a good size. But then, yeah, if you're working in tech industry, you have hundreds of thousands of people in your area that could be working in that.
Right. So how should teams think about building out their talent? The support folks around them, and in particular those advisors. If they're thinking about niching, and I like the idea of within a larger organization you can have teams focused on a niche. But does that impact how they're going to hire or their ability to build teams if the focus of who they're going after is so perhaps narrowly defined?
If you niche, you are definitely going to attract some people and turn away other people when it comes to staffing. Though the ones that are going to be attracted to that niche or that specialty area, depending on how you have your firm set up, is going to be a good fit, because they are also interested in that. A really good example I can think of is a firm I work with that works with first responders, but mostly firefighters. And so they have hired on retired firefighters into their company to be able to help with business development. So it was just a clear fit. So not only are you getting people who are like passionate about working with that niche, usually they have access already to that niche. And so they become a business development tool all on their own because they do have access. This particular firm actually did not start with firefighters. They did not have personal experience with that. So being able to recruit these people into their firm really helped them get inroads with those groups.
So perhaps I think of it perhaps as a challenge in terms of attracting the right talent, but maybe it's actually a pretty big positive in that you're finding individuals who have been part of that niche and want to join you in your effort as a firm to help others like them. They know the struggles, they know the challenges, and they probably have a pretty good network within that niche. So perhaps it's actually a way to build strength in your go-to-market.
Absolutely. And one other thing is I know a lot of firms are struggling to recruit right now. There's just not enough people out there. I hear that all the time. And so if you can maybe recruit someone who's not a financial advisor, like a career changer, that might be easier for you to find people who are interested in the financial sector, but maybe don't have that experience yet, but they have experience with that niche. It can be a way to actually open the pool of people that you can recruit, and then you have to train them from there. So you got to take that into consideration, but it does open the talent pool in some ways.
And yeah, I mean, it's a specific message to your target audience from a hiring perspective that this is who you support, and they understand that. I love it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This podcast is all about organic growth. We talk about strategies and tactics to help drive growth at firms. So maybe just to step back and you've written the book, but tell us why firms should niche in the first place. What are the benefits of doing this?
The number one thing that I see is really impactful for advisors is it gives them a focus. And I mentioned this earlier. But so many advisors, whether they're working for a big firm or they're starting their own practice, they just don't even know where to begin with how to market. And so it really does give you an idea of where you should be spending your time. So having that ideal client profile in mind, you can think about like, where does this person go? What do they read? What podcasts do they listen to? And then you can start being in those same places versus just joining the Chamber of Commerce and starting to network and hoping that you're going to somehow get referrals that way. And because of that, it gives you focus. It's easier for you to choose the marketing tactics that you want to do. You actually get more return on investment from your marketing because you are only spending money on the things that you know are going to directly target or reach your niche. And so you're not spending unnecessary money on marketing anymore. And honestly, I think it's just a lot more satisfying for people because they're working with the people that they enjoy most, and they become part of that community, and they just start to have this word of mouth spread about what they're doing and the work they're doing with these types of clients. And, just from a marketing and personal satisfaction standpoint, it's just really uplifting for these advisors. And then, of course, there's the financial aspects as well.
So having that direction, having that focus in terms of who you're going after, just eliminates, I would imagine, a lot of distractions, would eliminate areas that you may think you need to do in terms of marketing and things like that, and simplify it. Having that laser focus on who you're going after makes a lot of sense. In the book, you talk about, and I think this is really important, it's the right solutions based on unique needs. That's sort of the essence I was thinking of niching. There's an audience out there, they have a common challenge or common set of needs. And as a firm, when you niche, you can define the right solution set based on them. You talked about airline pilots, but tell us a little bit about how that niching is a recipe for organic growth.
I think about the way I define a niche is it's the type of client, the problem they're facing, and the solution you're offering. So it's kind of all three of those things. And the solution piece is really important because it's like, well, you could just say you work with business owners that are exiting their business, but if you don't have your services really tailored to help them with that need, you're not really any different than a generalist out there. Being able to bring in different solutions that are unique to that niche is really going to help you stand out. It can also help you with partnerships too for more organic growth. For example, if you're working in longevity planning, a niche around that, you can have relationships with the home care providers, and that becomes like a mutual referral source at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen also in that same niche people who have partnered with the senior, what do you call those? The senior homes that are 55 and over communities, and helping their clients figure out how to pay to live in those communities, partnering with those communities and getting referrals back. So when you kind of think about what services are you going to provide, not only does it make you unique to your specific niche and being able to service them exactly the way they need to be serviced, but it creates partnerships too, which are always a great way to grow your business organically.
Love it. And I would imagine another benefit is the time savings. And you talk about it in the book, reducing drag on operational tasks and things like that. Tell us a little bit more about the time savings, that sort of value when it comes to niching.
It's been one of the most surprising things that people find when they start to niche. Originally, they usually go into it for marketing purposes because they know that they're going to see more results from their marketing if they do that. But then they always tell me, I'm surprised by how much more streamlined my business has become. They spend less time with the kind of the back end side of dealing with clients because all the processes are streamlined. They're all the same because these clients all have the same problem.
Right.
They're not researching different pension plans from all these different types of companies. They know everything about the one pension plan and that one company that they're specializing in. Or they're not trying to also figure out, how to help their business owner client if they're mostly working with executives. And so there's a lot less need to be researching and offering all these different services, which saves them a ton of time. And then they can create like really cool tools and workflows and things like that, because the process is the same 99% of the time. And I don't want to say it's cookie cutter, because that's not what it is. It's just they become so expert in this niche that they can be super efficient with how they service their clients. And so yeah, go ahead.
Well, and they're creating something based on a defined audience with a defined set of unique challenges. It's not something where you may have a Henry walking in the door one day and then a pre-retiree the next day, and then a young tech executive, something like that. You're reducing that drag on the services and perhaps even how to service.
I'm always amazed when people want to work with so many different types of people, because I just think about how much effort that is to learn about that new person to be able to service them properly. For my own business, because I've worked with financial advisors for so long now, if someone came to me and said, "Can you help me market my restaurant?" I would have no idea how do you even start doing that. It would probably take me 10 times as long to figure it out, because it's not something that I've done day in and day out. And the same is true with advisors and their clients. Like, you can get really good at servicing one type of client when you focus on a niche.
Makes sense. We'll talk about channels. We just sort of hit on referrals a little bit, content, targeted ads. But before we do that, you have a spot in the book, and I think this is coming from research from somebody else. But you talk about the income differential, and that niching drives a significant increase in income versus non-niching. We'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and perhaps why you think that's the case.
Yeah, there was a nice 2020 study published on kitsis.com, and they said that an advisor who niches earns an average of $660,000 versus $395,000 for non-niche advisors in the same income percentile when they're comparing apples to apples. So, I mean, that's a huge amount of difference between those.
That's significant, sure.
Yeah. And they also said that those niche advisors can set their AUM fees 9% higher and generate 20% higher standalone planning fees. I think the reason that is the case is because one is the streamlining of what we talked about, the processes, because they're able to be more efficient in the back end of the business, that they are able to work with more clients per advisor. And so obviously the revenue goes up from there. If you can take on 120 people versus 100, that's a lot more revenue, and you're working the same amount of time. As far as the fees and the AUM, people are willing to pay for expertise. And so if you're in a niche that has that kind of income and you can show a different level of value than a generalist firm, you can set higher fees. And so that expertise just comes with a higher price tag in a lot of situations. So I think it's a combination of those things is why that those incomes and the fees are so different.
And pretty significant. If that's not enough of a reason to go niche, I don't know what is.
Yeah, an extra couple $100,000 a year sounds great.
Yeah. Why not? So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about sort of core organic growth channels. Referrals, I would imagine within a niching construct are pretty strong, because and you're talking a lot in the book about community, but content, focused on a niche, and you're putting content together for that audience, simplifies the process versus trying to put together content for a wider set of prospects. Targeted ads, where you're going to target, who you're going to target, what the message may be. Some thoughts from you, Kristen, on how you think firms should, or the impact that niching has on traditional lead generation and funnel management.
Again, I feel like a broken record at this point, but niching helps you focus. And what I hear a lot of advisors saying is that they wonder if they should do Instagram or if they should do TikTok, or where they should be, and they're always thinking about the channel first versus the client first. And if you think about the client first, it makes all other decisions a lot easier. So if you're like working with business owners, that are exiting, probably TikTok is not a great idea. But if you've been hearing about TikTok all the time, you might think that that's what you should be doing. So it really, again, focuses on your ideal client and where you need to be. So I think about this advisor I was talking about with the firefighters. They wrote a book and they just drop it off at all of the different fire stations in the state. And they do this once a year and they drop off, a couple boxes of it. And that's, a lot of what their content marketing is. And they take it directly to where that advisor is. And then they will also go to and sponsor any events that are about firefighters because that's where the firefighters are. I think the biggest mistake I see is people want to choose a channel before thinking about where their client is actually spending their time.
Mm-hmm.
You can't force your client to be where you want them to be. You got to be where they are. And so having that niche really helps you make those decisions of where to spend your time and your money. And then, when you are in those communities on a regular basis, the word of mouth and the referrals really starts to get generating.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. So last question, Kristen. So based on what you know now, what advice would you give yourself 5 years ago to help your clients accelerate their growth?
I was thinking a lot about this because you sent me these questions beforehand. And I think what I would do is I would not let advisors drag their feet when it comes to going into a niche. The advisors that I see that are most successful, they pick a niche and they act fast. So, within a week or two, they are starting to talk to anyone they can in their niche. And they are starting to generate content. And they are getting out there and they are just like fire hosing on their niche immediately. And they are the ones that have the most success because people need to see you and get to know you. And so the more you're out there, in a short period of time, the more results you see fairly quickly. The advisors I see that just kind of slowly incorporate a niche because, they're working with 90 other clients and they're just struggling to kind of manage that, but they want a niche and it takes them, a year or so to really get through everything. I find that they just don't see the same results as the people who are just like going all in all at once. And just a difference in effort over a short period of time makes such a big difference in what I've seen the advisors who really accelerate their growth versus the ones that kind of drag along for a while.
So be deliberate, be fast.
Be fast and have volume, like get the word out there as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So content and networking and whatever you can do just to get your name in front of those people as quickly as possible.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Kristen, I want to thank you for joining us today. Been a pleasure to chat with you. If the audience hasn't, check out Uncomparable. It's a great book, quick read, great anecdotes and use cases in the book, great stories, and I think really great direction. So, Kristen, thanks again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thank you for listening to the Grow Organically podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit catchlight.ai, where you can access all our podcasts, including show notes and other resources to keep learning. This podcast was produced by Catchlight Insights, LLC. It is for informational and educational purposes only. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer or recommendation of any securities and is not intended to provide tax, legal, or investment advice. The views expressed are those of the speakers and not necessarily those of Catchlight or its affiliates, and are as of the date indicated, based on the information available at that time, and may change based on market or other conditions. Catchlight does not assume any duty to update any of the information. Catchlight and other third parties mentioned in the podcast are independent entities and not affiliated. Catchlight does not endorse any investment advisor or provide advice or recommendations to any prospective or existing client of an investment advisor as to the selection or retention of that investment advisor. The information is not intended for any person or entity in any jurisdiction where the distribution or use of such information would be contrary to local law. Third-party trademarks referenced herein are the property of the respective owners. All others are the property of Catchlight Insights, LLC, copyright 2024 Catchlight Insights, LLC. All rights reserved.